Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing swell today. We have Tribunate, and Tribunate is, of course, a fun little awesome channel we've been reacting to for about 3 or 4 videos now. This is called Roman Chariot Racing. It was their first published video, I believe. Yeah, I love things like this. This feels very similar to like Told in Stone's narrative. So let's jump in and see what chariot racing was like. And I'm thinking this is going to be heavily focused towards like the Circus Maximus, if that's what it was called. I'm pretty sure that's what it was called. But yeah, let's go. Like button.
The poet Juvenal's famous line about the Romans' insatiable appetite for bread and circuses remains one of the most enduring Latin quotations to this day. But while bread is easy enough for us to conjure, the Roman idea of the circus has partially been lost to time. Though everyone is familiar with the great gladiatorial combats of the Colosseum, chariot racing, the other great Roman passion, has faded in the popular consciousness. This is somewhat ironic, as the term circus is derived directly from the chariot racing arena, and at its height, the Circus Maximus.
Oh my goodness. I never connected the two. You know, obviously, like, to keep the people happy because, you know, whether it's a modern country like the United States where you're going to war, you're having a 38 trillion national debt and XYZ, if you keep the public occupied by way of bread and circus, meaning entertainment and their bellies full, that will stop public uprising, revolution, as you saw in any revolution. You know, one of these two, mainly bread, but, you know, you can argue circus, which is a umbrella topic of activities that could derive from public gatherings, pastimes, XYZ. But the pastimes directly correlate to the Circus Maximus of this quote. Circus. Never connected the two. That's insane.
Had room for 250,000 spectators, dwarfing the 80,000-seat Colosseum. We know that the races were immensely popular, with 5 other circuses present in Imperial Rome in addition to the vast Circus Maximus. Although very dangerous, the races lacked the intentional brutality and bloodshed seen at the gladiatorial bouts and beast fights of the...
One thing that we really never talk about is like, yeah, there's that many potential seats in the Circus Maximus, but what about were they sold out? You know what I'm saying? What can we say was the ratio? Was it 80% capacity? Was it 100% capacity? That's what I'm wondering.
Colosseum. Perhaps this made the events a bit more family-friendly and added to their appeal. As the empire spread and subject communities became more Romanized, there was an increased appetite for chariot races. By the end of the 1st century of the Common Era, racetracks had appeared all over the Roman world, from Spain in the far west to the Levant in the east and Africa in the south. But the Circus Maximus was the greatest of them by far. More than just the largest building in Rome, for over 2,000 years it was the largest sporting venue ever constructed. It was only surpassed by the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in 2004.
Dang!
Before that venue downsized in 2013 to a mere 235,000 seats. The oldest and most prestigious circus in the city, it was located between the Aventine and Palatine Hills on marshland drained during the reign of Numa, the second king of Rome.
Pilius.
The track itself was 600 yards long and 200 yards wide. We know that there were 2 ancient cult shrines at either end of the circus, and it is easy to imagine how amateur races on the flat plain between them eventually became enough of a spectator sport to justify a stadium. The central dividing wall, or spina, around which the chariots raced, was decorated with obelisks from Egypt.
That's cool.
Altars to the gods, and other trophies captured by the expansionist Roman armies.
Wow. So this, as the empire, or mainly republic, then empire, evolved, so did their stadiums.
To ensure a fair race, the 12 starting gates were laid out in a slight arc that made distances to the first turn equal for all participants. The venue
That's very similar to how you see like a marathon or like the Olympics, where you'll have different starting spots depending on where someone is whenever they're going to go on the turn. That's engineering at its finest.
grew over time, eventually topping out at a capacity of 250,000. For most, seating was nothing more than rudimentary wooden benches, though the front rows were made of stone and reserved for vestal virgins, senators, and equites. It should come as no surprise that a wooden structure of this size burned down more than once,
Huh.
but it
Yeah.
was always restored and rebuilt on a grander scale. Eventually, the Circus Maximus was adorned with marble and gilded statues, and it became one of the most magnificent structures in Rome. The races themselves were conducted by 4 teams owned by contractors during the Republic, but later owned by the Emperor himself. Naming conventions were minimal, and the teams were simply known as the Reds, the Greens, the Whites, and the Blues. They earned these rather unimaginative names from the colors that the drivers wore as they stood in their slight 2-wheeled chariots that were typically pulled by either 2 or 4 horses, though we do have records of chariots being pulled by camels and even elephants.
That's crazy. I don't know. That's got to be ceremonial.
The Blues and the Greens were the most popular factions, and even counted emperors as supporters. Vitellius may not have reigned for long, but as a devout fan of the Blues, he saw to it that several spectators who insulted his favorite team were executed. Caligula backed the Greens, and even ate dinner, the most prestigious Roman meal, in the stables with his team. Somewhat fitting for a man that instituted the Tetrarchy and added 3 new emperors, Diocletian also tried to expand the number of chariot teams by adding gold and purple factions. But expansion franchises always have a hard time catching on, and these teams quickly folded. The atmosphere was raucous, and would have been recognizable to anyone familiar with a high-stakes European soccer match. The passions aroused in favor of the teams could divide families and wreck friendships. Their roars and cheers could also be heard for miles. The poet Juvenal informs us that when passing by the circus, he could tell merely by the crowd noise which faction had won a race. On a race day, men, women, and children began to pour into the circus before dawn. Those that arrived late were unable to find a seat unless they had hired
Really? I was just talking about capacity.
someone to reserve a spot for them. No man was admitted unless in a toga, as this was the badge of citizenship, so slaves and resident aliens were excluded from the festivities. The sound of an
That's interesting. I wouldn't expect that, because sometimes you would definitely be able to go as a guest to the Colosseum. So why not in this version?
approaching band heralded the entry of the presiding consul in his chariot, with his retinue of lictors, legionaries, and cavalry, followed by the performers, the charioteers themselves, then singers and priests. This procession was then followed by incense bearers carrying gold and silver censers with images of the gods and goddesses borne aloft on biers or riding in chariots. There was no separation of church and state in ancient Rome. All public events were bound in one way or another to sacred rituals.
Yep.
All of these participants received tremendous applause, but it was the appearance of the emperor himself in his special box which served as the signal for renewed cheers.
I wonder if you had commentators. I mean, I guess there's no way to amplify your voice. I guess that makes no sense at all. So I guess like that's the only thing. You don't have commentators, so it's very much collective noise that institutes who is winning.
An early start was necessary, because on major racing days, there may have been as many as 12 or 16 races. The first race of the day was generally preceded by a ceremonial lap, called the Pampa, around the central spina. To win the first race of the day, immediately after the Pampa, was the highest honor a charioteer could hope for. The risk for each charioteer was increased by their practice of looping the slack of the reins around their waists. This gave them better leverage and control, but meant they would be dragged behind a stampeding chariot if they lost control. To avoid this danger, their last hope was the falx, a specialized curved knife that they carried specifically to rapidly cut the reins. But even if this was achieved, then they were still far from being out of harm's way, as another racer could be just meters behind them.
Yeah, that's dangerous stuff right there.
So although the best charioteers could become fabulously wealthy, the career was certainly not for the meek. With all the risks involved,
Ben-Hur is obviously one of the... It's been reproduced a few times. There's even video games on this as well. I need to dive back into that and see this firsthand.
it should come as little surprise that most charioteers were usually slaves or men from the lower classes. But with risk came reward, as the best drivers were handsomely paid and were always the talk of the town. One such
They're like athletes.
man was Apuleius Diodes, a legend in his own time and a celebrated figure in Roman chariot racing. In a sport where any given race could be your last, his career spanned an impressive 24 years, beginning in 122 of the Common Era at the age of just 18, and concluding in 146 with his retirement. He competed in 4,257 races and recorded 1,462 wins.
That's a crazy win rate. How many races?
57 with his retirement. He competed in 4,000
Almost a 25% freaking win rate?
2 wins, meaning that he won over 34% of the races he ever entered. These exploits naturally made Apuleius and others like him into household names.
I think it obviously has more to do with the breed. Like, obviously, there's probably some amazing amount of skill needed to be the driver, but then the horse as well. Like, how good is your horse team? How good is the family tree of that horse, where you get thoroughbreds? It's probably part of it too. There's probably a lot of stuff within that.
But the Roman love for the races was so profound that even the horses became celebrities.
Yeah.
The poet Martial was indignant that his name was virtually unknown, while the taverns were full of talk, celebrating their favorite horses. This is fitting, as despite his skill, Apuleius would never have won anything if not for his horses. The Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder provides some of the basics about the animals, stating that military horses had physiques that were not suited for the racetrack, and that the optimum age for a racehorse was just 5 years old. Pliny also had a healthy respect for the intelligence and race sense of the circus horses, both of which he viewed as vital to their success. Like modern horse racing, a healthy betting culture developed around the races, with millions of sesterces being gambled away on any given race day.
That's a pastime right there. That's probably a good majority of the wealthy did that, probably.
With so much money on the line, a clear winner was always required. So, on the rare instances that a race might have been too close to call, the two final contestants raced an eighth and final lap to determine the winner.
So there's sudden death, okay.
Before the construction of Rome's first amphitheater during the reign of Augustus, the circuses were the primary venue for fights to the death between gladiators and for wild beast hunts. And while the Circus Maximus was far and away the most popular circus in the city, today it is actually the site of another circus, one that never had a fraction of the fanfare of the Circus Maximus, which draws in tourists by the millions. St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican City lies atop the ruins of the Circus of Nero.
Wow. I think I heard about that in one of the Told Stone videos.
Commemorating the spot where Catholics hold that Peter, then the leader of the Roman Church, was martyred during Nero's persecutions. Catholic tradition states that he was crucified upside down here, and was buried near the spot of his
Crucified upside down? What?
suffering, just outside the circus, in the cemetery on the Mons Vaticanus. A shrine was built on this site, and almost 300 years later, Old St. Peter's Basilica was constructed over the grave by the Emperor Constantine. Today, the obelisk that resided in the spina of the circus forms the centerpiece of St. Peter's Square.
Wow.
So while Rome's circuses are now all in ruins, the events that took place there are still shaping history in profound ways.
That's cool. Well, this is your debut video, Tribunate. What a video. Love this narration. Now I'm so much more well informed about circuses, specifically those that revolve around horse racing and Roman Republic and Roman Imperial. Very exciting. And that's crazy to know about that obelisk and the Circus of Nero and the history there. It just enriches the history of the St. Peter's Basilica. Thank you guys for being here, as always. Let me know down below, would you go to a Circus Maximus race? Would you care to ever be a driver of a chariot? Would you ever risk your life and do that for the thrill of it? I don't know. I might do a ride along. I don't know if I would take the reins though. But thank you guys for being here as always. Leave me some video suggestions down below. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out and bye-bye.